Strung, Chapter 10. Just how many hours of sleep he had gotten when he opened his eyes the next morning, Randall had no idea. What he could determine after looking around, however, was that Tommy must have gotten far fewer. For during the night, all the pages of the manuscript had been put into the folder, which now lay on the dining table. Next to it were two backpacks, one stuffed to the brim and one half full, which hadn't been there the night before. So yeah, his big brother had been busy. With a body that felt as if all his larger bones had been wrapped in barbed wire, Randall got up from the couch and went out into the kitchen. Outside, the sun was rising, and through the large window above the kitchen table, he could see that the first orange-red flames had caught on to the lowest clouds. Before long, the rest of the sky would also burst into flames. Normally, he would have enjoyed the sight, but right now it felt as if some vile god had decided to literally set the entire world on fire. The sunrise just made him feel empty inside. He went over to the fridge, opened the door, and let his eyes slide down over the shelves. The selection wasn't overwhelming, but he did locate some butter and a packet of sliced cheese. He brought these two things over to the opposite side of the kitchen where the breadbasket and the cutting board were located. As he stood there preparing his rather mediocre breakfast, he heard a door open and close again. With the sound came a stream of cold air that told him it had been the front door. His first thought was that Tommy probably had picked up some more firewood from the shed, but when Tommy appeared in the doorway, it quickly became clear that it was something else he had brought from the shed. "I don't know about that, Tommy." Tommy looked down at the hunting rifle in his hands, their dad's old Remington, and then back at Randall. "Don't even start with that shit," he said. "If we are going out there, we're going to bring a weapon." "And good morning to you too." "Yeah, good morning," Randall said. "I'm just saying." No further did he get into the sentence before Tommy had turned around and left the room again. "You're such a fucking brat sometimes," Randall thought. But he kept it to himself. When it came down to bringing the rifle probably wasn't the worst idea, even though he generally wasn't a big supporter of firearms. "I'll start loading the stuff in the car," Tommy shouted from the living room. "Can you bring the last bag out? Then we'll drive as soon as you're done eating." "Okay," Randall replied, after which he stuffed the last of his cheese sandwich into his mouth and chewed it while scrubbing the butter knife under the tap in the kitchen sink. Afterward, he went into the living room where he picked up the folder with the manuscript and put it into the half-full backpack. Next, he lifted the backpack, threw it over his shoulder, and moaned at the weight. Christ, you'd think he packed for a wilderness trip in Australia. The bag was heavy, damn heavy, but, of course, that wasn't the only factor that came into play. His body also wasn't in the best shape, given the beating he had received the previous evening. For the same reason, it was also with extreme care he walked down the 5 steps between the terrace in front of the door and the gravel in the driveway. "Do you need a hand with it?" asked Tommy, who stood at the door to the shed, trying to get the key and rusty padlock to work together. Randall shook his head. "No, I've got it." "Are you sure?" "Got it," Randall repeated. And he did, but only just, because when he lifted the bag off his shoulder and let it fall into the trunk of the car, the walk had drained him of so much energy that he was on the verge of losing his balance and following it down in there. "You just get in. I'm going to lock up the rest, then I'm ready." With those words, Tommy disappeared around the house for a minute while Randall sat down in the Chevy's passenger seat. When Tommy came back, he sat down in the driver's seat and put the key in the ignition. But he didn't start the car right away. Instead, he turned to Randall and gave him a solemn look. "Are we ready for this?" Randall looked at his brother and then out into the dirt road that connected the driveway of their parents' old secluded farm with the outside world. A world that had always felt distant when he was out here, and that now did so to a much greater extent than ever before. "Not at all," he said. and meant it with all his heart. But let's just get going.